Hello, viewers of our Stop the Destruction of the World program. We are here once again to provide you with a better understanding of triological science, or integral psychoanalysis. This work has been developed by psychoanalyst Norberto Keppe. We call this work analytical trilogy as well because it unifies science, philosophy, and metaphysics. We treat the integral human being because human beings are whole beings. To treat our bodies, our illnesses, means to join all these things because this has to do with the relationship between our feelings and our thoughts. How our practical day-to-day activities are influenced by our feelings and thoughts, and how all this works together. It appears that our psychopathology, our sick attitudes, impede our functioning in the right way, causing even larger problems on our planet, in our society, in our family lives, and even to our bodies. Dr. Keppe, we have a number of books here that I would like to introduce to our viewers. They are all easy to understand and very therapeutic.
We've lived in many different countries, including France for 7 years. We lived in England, in Portugal. We had already lived in the United States, and also obviously in Austria. Now, in the United States, I wrote this book. Take a look here. It's about the decay of the American people and of the United States. I wrote this in 1984. As you well know, decadence isn't only an economic thing. The decay that exists in the world is something much more moral. Now, it's a big mistake to think that moral or immoral issues are related to sex. They're not. The issue is much more than this. It's a question of attitude. For example, when cinema shows crimes in films, that is, one person killing another, this is an immoral attitude. This shouldn't be shown. This shouldn't be done. Other than in an exceptional case, like a famous case, but not in the way that filmmakers set up guns in people's hands and shows them shooting others, or so many alcoholic drinks or cigarettes in people's hands, showing people smoking, or people with malefic attitudes. Because it's obvious that teenagers and even children become very, very influenced by these attitudes. What really grips humanity are examples. They say that words are worth their weight in gold. And of course, advice is worth gold. But many times people listen with one ear and it goes out the other. Now, one's example, as I mentioned, really takes the person. A person, by example, shows something and other people follow. So take a look at this diagram that deals with the signs of neurosis. Let's see. Why do individuals become neurotic, become ill? Not only mentally ill, but physically as well. Firstly, let's take a look. The person who can't deal with any type of frustration. He creates delirious ideas, and he is angry and resentful. So let's look at the first one then. Can't tolerate frustrations. What does this mean? It means that the individual can't accept a no. For example, a child who tries to get something he shouldn't have until the parents give in. Or a person who spends too much. Or an exaggerated refusal of good things for the child. All of this is neurotic conduct. And later in life, this person wants everything society has to offer. But he's not going to have it, of course. He's not going to be able to tolerate any frustrations. So what is a sane individual? It's an individual who can tolerate frustrations in his life. He doesn't have something he wants, but he can accept not having it. And furthermore, the sane person is the one who renounces many of the pleasures that are around, many goods. He renounces certain attitudes that would be nice, but he does this in order to strengthen his goodwill. And secondly, creating delirious ideas. And what are delirious ideas? They are things that don't exist. For example, a person thinks that he can become a super millionaire without being a thief or a person who invades other people's goods or doing an illegal business. An individual who thinks he can become a super millionaire is one who is distorting his mind. And thirdly now, let's see, the individual whose conduct is resentful and full of anger. This is interesting. These films we watch, especially American films, that show people exploding with hatred. They are frustrated, so they throw everything away, or smash the TV, or he shoots something. They have an explosive attitude. This exists a lot in the Anglo-Saxon world, because they think that by manifesting rage, they will alleviate the tension. But it's not like this. The more rage, the more fury an individual manifests, the more negative elements the person manifests, the more negative he becomes. The more rage the person transmits, the more rage he creates inside himself. So as they say, love pays itself back. An individual who gives love receives a lot of love back. But an individual who gives rage receives a lot of rage back.
Dr. Kepi, it's a mistake to believe that rage exists within and that we have to empty ourselves of this rage. Instead, rage is an attitude and even a habit.
It's the denial of affection.
Right. If a person becomes accustomed to rage and develops this attitude, that person becomes even more hateful.
And the rage that a person expresses against something, this attacks his own organism. It's easy to observe that those who often frequent the doctor or hospitals are the ones who are very angry people. People who have a lot of physical symptoms, a lot of pain in their bodies. This is interesting. This is a person who has a lot of hate in his heart.
This explains the relation between feelings, emotions, and our psychoneuroimmune systems. I explain this better in this book, Healing Through Consciousness, Theomania and Stress.
Now, take a look at what we have here in fourth place. The person who doesn't put ideas together well, whose train of thought isn't organized, who mixes things up. The person who is restless lives way out there somewhere, out of reality. This is a person who is not only putting his mind at risk, but also his body. Or, as in fifth place, look, take a look at this. Excessive interest in earthly things. The person who looks for well-being in bars or cinemas, who spends too much time there. Of course, going to these places once in a while is normal, but I'm talking about the person who is always searching for how he can obtain all the goods and pleasures he possibly can from society, like staying out all night. This happens a lot in Europe, mainly in Portugal. As a result, the people there are very sedated. I'm referring to this region from Lisbon down to Algarve. And this is why these people are all spaced out during the day and can't accomplish much of anything. Take a look now at another element. Let's see. Excessive interest in money. The miser who thinks money is the sole reason for existence is an individual who obviously lives outside reality, because what is external, such as money, power, and sensorial things, will never provide internal satisfaction. We only feel well when we are in agreement with goodness, with the truth, and the ethics that are within us. Have you ever paid attention to artists, mainly the good ones, to see how peaceful, how pacific they are? It's rare for an artist to commit serious crimes or create problems for society. It's very rare. Why? Because they are in contact with their inner harmony, with the truth, with all the goodness that they have within themselves. Now, let's see now. Here's another element that jeopardizes our lives, especially nowadays. It's the shopping mania, this consumerism, as we call it. Society pushes the individual toward excessive consumerism in order to maintain this wild capitalism. Because, of course, from the time of birth, people want to exploit others. We could say that people are born with capitalistic tendencies. This is part of human pathology. But going shopping and buying lots of things, well, a client had an example this morning. His mother went out and spent $50,000 when she didn't even have $2,000 or $3,000 to spend. That's $50,000 that she doesn't have. This illustrates the extreme absurdities that people get into in the consumerism. And our eighth point, let's see. Voracity of indulgence in food and drink, and the excess of intrigues and slander that people commit.
And, Dr. Kepi, if we analyze these things you mentioned, each one is linked to the destruction of the world. All of this leads humanity to not only destroy itself, but the planet. So we'll be back shortly to continue with today's program.
Even if we don't have a lot of consciousness, we can perceive that life is divine. We live in transcendence, whether we accept it or not. We still live in an earthly paradise, except we don't accept it. In fact, we attack what is most beautiful, good, and real. Consciousness of our envy and inversion will make it possible for us to return to this paradise we've abandoned. We don't need to build it. We just need to accept it. The Stop the Destruction of the World Association was created to bring about exactly this consciousness. We are working to return the world to goodness. Join us. The most original contemporaneous writer in the world today, says the National Scientific Research Center in France. A genuine contributor to the intellectual treasury of civilization, says former U.S. Ambassador Joseph Kogassian. For these times of uncertainty and conflict comes a work of extraordinary vision, hope, and moral clarity. Brazilian psychoanalyst and social scientist Norberto Kepi writes with wisdom and authority about the things that really matter. How to heal illness, how inverted science is leading the destruction of nature, and what to do about it. Finding spirituality within, structuring a truly just society. There are more than 3,000 books published worldwide every day. None are more important than these. The books of Norberto Kepi. Trilogical science, leading us to a new world.
I remember the book Glorification that Dr. Kepi wrote. I was with him many of the nights or days where he got those inspirations from God, and it was a necessity for him to write what he received. So the book was totally written under inspiration. But it's not only a theological book, it's mostly a scientific book. Very therapeutic book. Very beautiful, by the way. And he used to wake up during the night, 2, 3 in the morning, and he said, let's go to the top of the mountain. And we were watching the sky in this dark night with no interference, so you could transcend the sky and see heaven through it. My God, you could adapt the writings that he did with the music of Beethoven, and this would be a trilogy of his writings and the music. It would be heaven.
Norberto Kepi's Glorification, available in the bookstore at stop.org.br.
Hur kommer det sig att du har kommit hit till Brasilien?
Dels så vart jag intresserad av integral psykoanalys för 1 år sedan. via en artikel i Svenska Dagbladet och började gå in på hemsidan och få information, månadsutskick och tyckte att det här var otroligt intressant. Och sen har jag varit med på föreläsningar, lyssnat på Kerstin Bergqvist i Stockholm och funnit att det här är liksom, här finns saker som får mig att förstå mera om mig själv och andra individer.
Och det är bland det intressantaste jag har gjort i mitt liv so far.
Den har mycket fokus på det här med våra projektioner och speglingar i möten med andra människor. Och jag tror att jag använder mig av nästan dagligen eller då och då. Om jag störs av en människas beteende så går jag genast till mig själv och undrar, vad är det här hos dig nu som får dig att trigga på den personen? Och så kan jag fundera och komma tillbaka, nu kan jag se det här. Och då blir jag lugn och behöver inte störas av den personens beteende.
I alla mina relationer till min familj, mina barn, till min häst.
Jag använder det dagligen. Och det är den kunskapen och förståelsen och insikten hur vi fungerar. Det är den insikten och förståelsen jag hittills fått om integral psykoanalys som jag tillämpar liksom på så långt jag har kommit. Och visst kan det fördjupas och vidgas och så vidare.
I would like to put up a diagram now to clarify the cause of neurosis. As you may know, Freud saw neurosis more as an affectionate sexual issue. His thought emerged from the Victorian era, named after the Queen of England, who reigned for 80 years, from 1820 to 1900, and she was very puritanical, as it is said. She was very demanding over her British subjects, and as England influenced Europe a lot during the Belle Époque, she created a very rigid environment everywhere in relation to sexuality. Now, back then, Freud and other writers of this time thought the individual became ill because of a lack of sexual affection. Now, at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century, psychiatrists began to see that the problem was much more related to the grandiose ideas that individuals had. Mainly Kraepelin, the German thinker and scientist and psychiatrist, who pretty much founded psychiatry, he noticed that the sick individuals that he treated, they all had these really big ideas about themselves. They put themselves above everyone else. This is why it is said that when a person thinks he's Napoleon, he's sick. Or when he thinks he's Jesus Christ, obviously he's a sick person. When someone thinks he's a famous personality, he is in fact ill, because he isn't that thing that he thinks he is. You'll notice that sick people never see themselves as someone small. They always place themselves way up there on high. So the root of the illness is what I will show you now on this diagram. Claudia, would you like to read?
Cappy has noticed, in contrast to Freud, that the real root of neurosis and psychosis is theomania, the hidden desire within every human being to be powerful like God.
Notice that Freud spoke about the issue of envy. He saw that the mentally ill were very envious, which in fact they are. We can consider that envy, along with arrogance, could be called the original sin of humanity. Therefore, we can conclude that every person is born with envy, everyone. This is why, from a very young age, children fight with others. They cry, they demand, especially children who are very envious, more paranoid. A child who has a lot of envy of adults generally sees all his unhappiness as coming from outside. from other people, mainly parents. Be it envious of husbands, envious of wives, or even of the children. So it's become difficult for people to stop a bit and feel who they really are inside, and to see that they are often against others, against the world. It's hard for them to understand that they are the ones who are causing their own problems. People never stop to think that they are the ones who are against humanity, that they put the blame on others, but it's they themselves who attack, and because of this, that they are ruining their own lives. Humanity must begin to interiorize. This is not to be confused with introjection, to put something from the outside to inside. To interiorize is to feel what you have inside yourself, in your interior life. If individuals don't interiorize, they will not become sane. Augustine, that famous 4th century thinker, always said that the interiorized man is a saint, is a good man. Why? Because then he stops blaming others and making other people's lives a hell. Like Sartre, that famous French intellectual, who said that hell was the other people. It's not the others. A person makes his own hell because he doesn't want to see that he's against everyone, and not everyone against him. In fact, this is the most difficult issue that there is in psychotherapy, especially with those who are the sickest. Entering now into a spiritual question, that of making sacrifices in order to develop. I'll give you an example. If you go to lunch and 2 or 3 dishes are presented, and you choose the one you like the most, but then purposefully don't eat it. Why? To force your goodwill. Or you really want to say something to another that you know would offend them. And sometimes it's even necessary to say, but you keep quiet. Not because you aren't able to speak, but to make a sacrifice. And the sacrifice that you make strengthens your life. Or another example, you want to read something that you shouldn't, something that's going to weaken your interior life. Or you'd like to leaf through a superficial magazine that you know would be nice, but you don't. Or you'd like to read a book that isn't necessary, but that you would like to read anyway, and you don't. Or there's a trip that you would like to take that isn't that important, and you don't take it. Or the one example of a sacrifice that you can make. Look, I've written it here for you. A day dedicated to someone else. This exercise would be fantastic for a person to do, because with this, he would begin to acquire sanity. Take 1 day a week, any day, and decide to do nothing for yourself, but to see what other people's needs are. See what your wife or husband or children want. See what your friends need, or what your work demands of you. 1 day only dedicated to doing good for your fellow man. If you could do this once a week, you will very quickly notice how your psychological life will get better, and how, of course, you will solve a whole series of problems. Why? Because the problem of the human being is in relation to his will. So now, let's take a look at the diagram. Let's see now, the next one. To do our own will is to accept evil. Why? Because the human will is inverted. It's upside down. Human beings want that envy and the voraciousness that stems from envy provide for him. So we eat too much, drink too much, smoke too much, we dissipate things too much. We create a life that isn't in service to others, an attitude that doesn't take life more seriously and accomplish good things for our fellow men and for ourselves. And secondly, let's take a look. Man's will is inverted due to envy, as I mentioned. In third place, he inverted the etiology of neurosis by placing instinct as something ill. What I mean is that the death instinct doesn't exist. We aren't born with an instinct that wants death. This doesn't exist. What exists is an impulse to death because of our envy. An individual who's very envious even wants to finish up with his own life, so as not to give pleasure to others, and mainly so as not to recognize that he is a son of God.
So that not to be grateful for all the goodness he receives.
Exactly. And in fourth place, Immanuel Kant said that man wants to be free to do evil. Look how exact his sentence is. And fifthly, if the individual is very sick, everything he does is wrong. Well, a psychoanalyst doesn't give counsel, but you know, if the human being would count to 10 before doing something, then he'd stop creating so many problems and difficult situations for humanity, as he is presently doing.
See you next time.